The rope burned against Cleon Westbrook's wrists as she stood on the wooden platform, her auburn hair whipping in the harsh Montana wind. Below her, a crowd of grimy prospectors and settlers shouted bids like she were livestock. $50. For the widow woman, hollered a bearded man missing half his teeth. She's strong stock, look at those hands. Another called out, making crude gestures. Cleon's jaw tightened. 3 months ago, she'd been tending her own homestead with her late husband Jeremiah. Now, after claim jumpers murdered him and burned their cabin, the territorial judge had declared her property to settle fabricated debts. $75. A portly merchant in a stained vest stepped forward. She make a fine cook for my establishment. The auctioneer, a rat-faced man named Bramwell Corliss, raised his gavel. Do I hear 80? From the edge of the crowd, a figure emerged on horseback. The Lakota warrior sat tall on his painted stallion, his long black hair braided with eagle feathers. Traditional buckskin and beadwork adorned his powerful frame, and a bone choker circled his throat. But it was his eyes that made Cleon's breath catch dark as winter night, yet burning with fierce intelligence. The crowd fell silent. Children hid behind their mothers' skirts. 100 horses, the warrior said in perfect English, his voice carrying across the square like thunder. Gasps rippled through the assembly. Corliss's face went pale. This is a civilized auction, Indian. We don't trade in 100 horses, the warrior repeated, his hand resting on the war club at his side. Worth more than all your paper money combined. A gruff voice shouted from the crowd. We don't deal with savages here. The warrior's gaze swept over the assembled men like a blade. My name is Ohanzi of the Oglala Lakota. I am nephew to Chief Red Cloud, and I say this woman goes free. The hell she does. The toothless prospector drew a rusty pistol. This here's white man's business. In one fluid motion, Ohanzi slid from his horse and produced a tomahawk. The weapon whistled through the air, striking the gun from the man's hand before he could cock it. The prospector yelped, clutching his stinging fingers. Anyone else? Ohanzi asked calmly, retrieving his tomahawk. Cleon stared down at him in wonder. No one, not even Jeremiah, had ever stood up for her with such fierce conviction. This stranger was risking his life for hers, defying everything his people and theirs believed about each other. Corliss stammered. You can't just... The territorial laws, your laws, Ohanzi cut him off, that allow the selling of human beings. Like cattle? He looked up at Cleon, and she saw something unexpected in his expression. Not just defiance, but tenderness. Step down from there. Don't you move, woman. Corliss snarled, raising his gavel like a weapon. Ohanzi was beside the platform in 2 strides. The auctioneer found himself staring down the length of a very sharp knife. The lady, Ohanzi said. Softly, steps down now. With shaking hands, Cleon gathered her torn skirts and climbed down from the auction block. As her feet touched solid ground, she felt something she hadn't experienced since Jeremiah's death hope. The warrior's eyes met hers. Can you ride? She nodded, not trusting her voice. Without another word, Ohanzi lifted her onto his horse as easily as if she weighed nothing, then swung up behind her. The warmth of his chest against her back was both foreign and comforting. This ain't over. Corliss screamed as they wheeled the horse around. Ohanzi looked back at the crowd one final time. Yes, he said quietly. It is. They rode hard across the wind-swept plains. Cleon pressed against Ohanzi's chest as his powerful arms guided the stallion through ravines and over rocky outcroppings. Behind them, dust clouds marked their pursuers, a hastily assembled posse led by Corliss and the territorial sheriff. Why? Cleon finally asked, her voice nearly lost in the thundering hooves. Why help me? Ohanzi's breath was warm against her ear. because no human being should be sold like property. And because ... double quotes, he paused, I have been watching you. Her heart skipped. Watching me? Your homestead bordered our winter hunting grounds. I saw how you tended your garden, how gently you spoke to the wild horses that came to drink from your creek. When your husband was killed, I saw your grief. And your strength? The posse's shouts grew closer. Ohansey urged his horse up a steep embankment, and Cleon gasped as they seemed to fly over a narrow canyon. The stallion landed gracefully on the other side, but their pursuers would have to find another way around. There, Ohansey pointed to a cluster of cottonwoods ahead. We rest there. In the shade of the ancient trees, he helped her down, his hands lingering on her waist. This close, she could see the intricate beadwork on his shirt, tiny blue and white patterns that seemed to dance in the dappled sunlight. Your name, she said. Ohansey. What does it mean? Shadow? A slight smile touched his lips. My grandmother said I moved like one, even as a child. I'm Clan. It's Celtic. Means sword maiden. Sword maiden? He repeated thoughtfully. It suits you. You have the heart of a warrior. She laughed bitterly. Some warrior? I couldn't even save my own home. Ohansey knelt beside the creek running through the grove and cupped water for her to drink. 20 armed men came in the night. What could one person do against such odds? The cool water soothed her parched throat. You would have found a way. Perhaps. But I would not have survived what you have these past months. The white man's courts, the auction block, you faced it all with your head high. That is true strength. A distant gunshot echoed across the prairie. They were running out of time. I must take you to my people, Ohansey said, his expression growing serious. It is the only way to keep you safe. But I warn you, many in my tribe will not welcome you. The whites have brought us nothing but broken treaties and death. And if they reject me, he stood, offering his hand. Then we find another way. Together. The word sent an unexpected thrill through her. When was the last time anyone had included her in their plans? Made her feel like a partner rather than a burden? As they mounted his horse again, she caught sight of her reflection in the creek hair wild, dress torn, face streaked with dust. She looked nothing like the proper frontier wife she'd once been. Somehow, that felt like freedom. Ohansey, she said as they resumed their flight, those horses you offered. You don't really have 100 horses, do you? His low chuckle rumbled against her back. No, but by the time they count them all, we will be long gone. And if we're caught? His arms tightened around her protectively. We won't be. But even as he spoke the words, the sound of pursuing hoofbeats grew louder. Behind them, at least. A dozen riders crested a hill, their weapons glinting in the afternoon sun. The race was far from over. The pursuing riders were gaining ground as Ohansey guided his stallion along a treacherous mountain path. One wrong step would send them plummeting into the canyon below, but the narrow trail was their only advantage against the larger posse. There, Sheriff Buckram's voice echoed off the rocks. They're trapped. Clayton's heart hammered against her ribs. The path ahead dead-ended at a sheer cliff face with no way down except a fatal drop. Behind them, the posse closed in, rifles raised. Ohansey brought his horse to a halt at the precipice. For a moment, Clayton thought they were truly caught. Then she felt his body tense with purpose. Hold tight, he whispered. What are you? Her words were lost as Ohansey let out a piercing war cry that seemed to shake the very stones. The sound bounced off the canyon walls, multiplying into what sounded like an entire war party. His stallion reared magnificently, hoofs pawing the air. The effect was immediate. Several posse members' horses spooked, nearly throwing their riders. In the chaos, Ohansey spotted what he'd been looking for, a narrow ledge hidden by shadows, invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. Trust me, he said, and guided his horse over the cliff's edge. Cleon bit back a scream as they seemed to fall into nothingness. Then the stallion's hooves found purchase on the hidden ledge, and they were picking their way along a secret path carved into the rock face by generations of his people. Above them, the posse argued and cursed, but none dared follow. The drop was too steep, the path too treacherous for white men who didn't know the mountain secrets. 20 minutes later, they emerged onto a high plateau dotted with pine trees. In the distance, smoke rose from cook fires. My village, Ohanzi said simply as they drew closer. Cleon saw the circle of buffalo hide tipis, their painted symbols telling stories of hunts and battles. Children played between the lodges while women tended fires and prepared meals. Warriors sat in council, their faces grave. The camp fell silent as Ohanzi rode in with his unusual passenger, an elderly man with steel-gray braids and wearing a magnificent war bonnet, stepped forward. His weathered face was stern but intelligent, and when he looked at Cleon, she felt as though he could see straight through to her soul. "Uncle," Ohanzi said in English, clearly for her benefit, "this is Cleon. She needs our protection." "So I see." Chief Red Cloud's voice carried the weight of authority. "And the white soldiers who will come looking for her. What of them? They will not find her here." "You are certain of this? Enough to risk all our lives?" Murmurs arose from the gathered tribe members. Cleon caught fragments, some in Lakota, others in broken English. Not all of it was friendly. "She brings trouble," an older woman said, her dark eyes flashing. "First her people steal our lands. Now this one brings their wars to our fires." "Winona speaks truth," added a young warrior with a scarred cheek. "Why should we help any Wasikyu?" Cleon straightened her shoulders. She might not understand all their words, but their meaning was clear enough. "I don't want to bring danger to your people," she said, sliding down from the horse. "If my presence here puts you at risk, you will stay." Ohanzi's voice cut through the debate like a blade. He dismounted and stood beside her, his hand finding hers. "She is under my protection. Anyone who harms her answers to me." The scarred warrior stepped forward, his hand on his knife. "And if the tribe counsels differently, nephew of our chief, will you choose this white woman over your own people?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Cleon felt the weight of every gaze upon her. She started to pull her hand free from Ohanzi's, but his fingers tightened gently, refusing to let go. "I choose what is right," Ohanzi said quietly, "as my uncle taught me, as our ancestors would expect." Red Cloud studied them both for a long moment. Then, to Cleon's surprise, his stern expression softened slightly. "Your name, Wasikyu woman." "What is it?" "Cleon Westbrook, sir, Chief Red Cloud." "And why were you on that auction block?" Cleon lifted her chin. "Because powerful men killed my husband and stole our land, then used false debts to claim I belonged to them." Her voice grew stronger. "But I belong to no one. I never will again." Something flickered in the chief's eyes. Approval, perhaps? He turned to his nephew. "She may stay, for now. But you understand what this means, Ohanzi, what it will cost." "I understand, uncle." But as the crowd began to disperse and Ohanzi led her toward a vacant tipi, Cleon wondered if either of them truly understood the price they would both pay for this moment of defiance. 3 weeks had passed since Cleon arrived in the Lakota village, and the uneasy tension had only deepened. She'd learned to tend the cook fires, helped with hide preparation, and even began picking up fragments of the Lakota language from the children who, unlike their parents, seemed curious rather than hostile about her presence, but whispers followed her everywhere. She was grinding corn outside Ohanzi's grandmother's lodge when Winona, the elder who'd spoken against her that first day, approached with several other women. "You think you understand us," Winona said in careful English, "but you are still Wasikyu, still our enemy." I've never been your enemy, Clan replied, not looking up from her work. Your people killed my son at the Battle of Little Bighorn. Your soldiers destroyed our sacred lands for gold. And now you come here, making Ohanzi forget his duties, his people. Clan set down her grinding stone and met the older woman's fierce gaze. I'm sorry for your loss, truly, but I didn't kill your son. I've lost people too. One husband, Winona spat. We have lost hundreds. You're right, Clan said simply. I can't understand your pain, but I'm not here to take anything from you. I'm just trying to survive. The honesty in her voice seemed to surprise Winona, but before the woman could respond, Ohanzi appeared at Clan's side. Is there a problem here? He asked quietly. The problem, said Lakota, the scarred warrior who challenged him before, is that you spend more time with her than planning our raids against the cavalry. What raids? Clan looked between them, alarm growing in her chest. Ohanzi's jaw tightened. There are no raids. There should be. Lakota's voice rose. While you play house with your pet white woman, soldiers mass at Fort Harrison. They plan to move us to the reservation by force. We should strike first. And give them excuse to slaughter us all? Ohanzi shot back. My uncle seeks peace through negotiation. Your uncle grows old. Perhaps it is time for younger blood to lead. The challenge was unmistakable. Several warriors behind Lakota nodded agreement. Clan felt the fragile peace of the village cracking like ice in spring. That night, she found Ohanzi sitting alone by the river, sharpening his knife with long, methodical strokes. I should leave, she said without preamble. No, Lakota is right. My being here is dividing your people. Ohanzi looked up at her, his dark eyes reflecting starlight. And where would you go? Back to the white towns where they would auction you again? Into the wilderness to die alone? Maybe that's what I deserve. In one swift motion he was on his feet, his hands gripping her shoulders. Never say that. You deserve to be free, to be safe, to be. What? She whispered. Happy. His voice was rough with emotion. You deserve to be happy, Clan. The way he said her name like a prayer, like a promise, made her heart race. They were standing. So close she could feel his breath on her face, could see the pulse beating at the base of his throat. I can't be happy if it costs you everything, she said. And I can't be happy knowing you're suffering. His thumb traced her cheek. Do you know what you've done to me, Sword Maiden? You've made me question everything I thought I knew about honor, about duty, about love. The last word hung between them like a confession. Ohanzi. I know it's impossible, he said quickly. I know our peoples will never accept it, but I cannot help what I feel. What do you feel? Instead of answering with words, he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, as though he feared she might pull away. When she melted against him instead, the kiss deepened, becoming something desperate and hungry and utterly right. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. I feel that, he whispered against her lips. Every moment. Every day. So do I, she admitted. But feeling it and acting on it are different things. What future could we possibly have? Before he could answer, a war cry split the night air. From the direction of the village came the thunder of horses, the crack of gunfire, and screams of terror. The cavalry had found them. Flames licked at the night sky as soldiers swarmed through the Lakota village, their sabers flashing in the firelight. Clan and Ohanzi raced back from the river to find chaos tip is burning, horses stampeding, warriors fighting desperately against overwhelming odds. The women and children, Ohanzi shouted over the gunfire. They're trying to reach the sacred cave. A blue-uniformed soldier on horseback bore down on an elderly woman carrying a screaming infant. Ohanzi's tomahawk flew through the air, striking. The man from his saddle just as Clan tackled the woman to safety behind an overturned wagon. Thank you, the woman gasped in Lakota. then looked at Clan with new understanding. Across the burning village, Clan spotted a familiar figure directing the attack. Sheriff Buckram, the same man who'd pursued them from the auction. But how had he found the hidden village? Her question was answered when she saw Lakota emerge from behind a lodge, speaking urgently with a cavalry officer. The scarred warrior caught her watching, and his lips curved in a cold smile. "Betrayer!" She screamed, but her voice was lost in the battle's roar. Ohanzi followed her gaze and saw the exchange. His face went white with rage and pain. Lakota, his childhood friend, his brother-in-arms, had sold out his own people. "Get the women to safety," Ohanzi told Clan, pressing a knife into her hands. "I'm ending this." "Don't." She grabbed his arm. "He's not worth your life." But Ohanzi was already moving, cutting through the melee toward his former friend. Lakota saw him coming and drew his own blade, his scarred face twisted with jealousy and hate. Finally, Lakota snarled as they circled each other. "Time to see who's worthy to lead." "You led soldiers to our sacred places," Ohanzi said, his voice deadly quiet. "You betrayed children. There is no honor in you." They clashed in a whirlwind of steel and fury. Both men were skilled, but Lakota fought with the desperate viciousness of someone who knew he was already damned. He managed to open a gash along Ohanzi's ribs before the warrior's superior speed told. Ohanzi's blade found Lakota's heart as his former friend fell. Lakota's dying words were poison. "She will never be one of us. You've lost everything. For nothing." But there was no time to process the betrayal or the loss. The cavalry was gaining ground, and Chief Red Cloud's voice rose above the chaos. "To the caves! All who can, to the sacred caves." Clan found herself helping to shepherd terrified children up a narrow mountain path while behind them, the village burned. Ohanzi covered their retreat, his warrior's instincts taking over despite his wound. In the sacred cave, a vast cavern decorated with ancient paintings of buffalo and eagles, the survivors huddled together. Nearly half the tribe had been killed or captured. The rest faced starvation in the coming winter with their supplies destroyed. "This is because of her," Winona said, pointing an accusing finger at Clan. "The spirits are angry that we harbored our enemy." "The spirits didn't betray us," Chief Red Cloud said quietly. "Lakota did, for army gold." "Because she bewitched him with jealousy," another woman wailed. "She turned our men against each other." Clan felt the weight of their grief and anger pressing down on her like a physical force. Maybe they were right. Maybe her presence had poisoned everything, turned friend against friend, brought death to innocence. "I'll go," she said, her voice echoing in the cave. "I'll surrender myself to the soldiers. Maybe they'll leave you in peace." "No." Ohanzi stepped forward, still bleeding from his wound. "She is not responsible for Lakota's greed or the cavalry's cruelty, and she is under my protection. Your protection has cost us everything." Winona shrieked. "Look around you, foolish boy. This is what your white woman has brought us." The accusation hit home because part of Ohanzi feared it might be true. If he hadn't defied the auction, hadn't brought Clan here, would his people still be safe in their village? Would the children now shivering in the cave still have their mothers? Would brave warriors still be alive to hunt and protect the tribe? Clan saw the doubt creeping into his eyes and felt her heart break. "They're right," she whispered. "This is my fault." "No," he said, but his voice lacked its usual conviction. That night, as the tribe slept fitfully in the cold cave, Clan made her decision. She kissed Ohanzi's forehead as he slept, whispered a silent goodbye, and slipped out into the darkness. By morning, she was gone. Clan walked through the morning mist toward the cavalry camp she'd spotted in the valley below. Each step felt like a betrayal of everything Ohanzi had fought for, but she couldn't live with more blood on her hands. Better to surrender herself and let his people suffer for her sake. Sheriff Buckram looked up from his coffee as she emerged. From the tree line, hands raised. His weathered face split into a triumphant grin. Well, well. The runaway bride decides to come home. I surrender, she said simply. But I want your word you'll leave the Lakota alone. They're no threat to anyone now. Buckram's laugh was harsh. You think you're in a position to make demands? After the trouble you've caused? Behind him, cavalry soldiers began gathering, their faces showing various degrees of interest, amusement, and hunger. Cleon recognized that look she'd seen it at the auction block. Besides, Buckram continued, can't leave them savages be. Orders are to bring them all in to the reservation. Every last one. Her heart sank. This had all been for nothing. Course, Buckram said, his eyes traveling over her body in a way that made her skin crawl. Might be willing to forget I saw some of them if you're cooperative. The implication was clear. Cleon had simply traded one auction block for another, but before she could respond, war cries split the morning air. Ohanzi burst from the forest on his painted stallion, followed by a dozen mounted warriors. His dark eyes blazed with fury when he saw the soldiers surrounding her. Let her go, he commanded, his rifle trained on Buckram. Now why would I do that? Buckram drawled, drawing his sidearm and pressing it to Cleon's temple. She came to me willing. Seems she's tired of playing Indian. That's not, Cleon. Started. Quiet, woman. Men are talking. Buckram's grip tightened. Here's what's going to happen. Chief, you and your boys are going to ride away peaceful-like, and I'm going to forget I saw you. This white woman stays where she belongs with white men. She belongs nowhere she doesn't choose to be, Ohanzi replied. His gaze found Cleon's. The choice is yours, Sword Maiden, always. In that moment, Cleon understood something profound. She'd spent her whole life being told where she belonged first by her father, then her husband, then the courts and auctioneers. Even now, Buckram was trying to decide her fate, but Ohanzi had never once presumed to own her. He'd offered protection, companionship, even love, but always with the understanding that the choice remained hers. My choice, she said clearly, is to go with him. Buckram's face darkened. Wrong answer. His finger tightened on the trigger. The gunshot was deafening. But it wasn't Buckram who fired. Chief Red Cloud lowered his smoking rifle from where he sat mounted at the edge of the clearing. The sheriff toppled sideways, a look of surprise frozen on his face. My nephew was right, the old chief said calmly. Some things are worth fighting for. What followed was swift and decisive. The cavalry soldiers, outnumbered and demoralized by their leader's death, surrendered without much fight. Most would be allowed to walk back to the fort with a warning. Lakota wanted no more bloodshed. As the dust settled, Ohanzi slid from his horse and pulled Cleon into his arms. Why? He whispered against her hair. Why did you leave? Because I love you, she said simply. Because I couldn't bear to watch. You lose everything for me, and I can't bear to lose you. He pulled back to look into her eyes. But my uncle is right. Some things are worth fighting for. You are worth fighting for. Chief Red Cloud approached them, his expression thoughtful. The old ways are ending, he said quietly. Our children will need to learn new ways to survive in a changing world. Perhaps? Perhaps that includes learning to see past the color of skin to the heart beneath. He looked directly at Cleon. You fought beside us, bled with us, protected our children. That makes you Lakota in all the ways that matter. Tears streamed down her face. But the others, Winona and the rest, they'll never accept me. Acceptance must be earned, Red Cloud replied. But you have already begun. Ohanzi took her hands in his. Will you stay? Not as my protection, not as my guest, but as my equal, my partner, my wife? The word hung between them, full of possibility and promise. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll stay. But even as he kissed her, both knew their trials were far from over. 6 months later, Cleanne sat outside her and Ohanzi's tipi, teaching young Ayana to braid sweetgrass while keeping one eye on the twins, Chaitan and Napachini, as they played. With wooden horses their father had carved. The village had been rebuilt in a hidden valley deeper in the mountains, far from the cavalry's reach. The sound of approaching horses made her look up. Ohanzi rode in with a hunting party, their pack. Animals laden with fresh elk meat. But his expression was troubled. "What is it?" she asked as he dismounted. "Riders coming from the east, flying a white flag, but ... Knee." He shrugged. "We'll know soon enough." The delegation that arrived an hour later was unlike any Cleanne had expected. Led by a middle-aged woman in a practical traveling dress, the group included a newspaper reporter, a photographer, and what appeared to be a government official. "I'm Dorothy Ashford," the woman announced, stepping forward with confidence despite being surrounded by armed warriors. "I represent the National Women's Suffrage Association. We've come to speak with Mrs. Cleanne Westbrook." Cleanne rose slowly, puzzled. "I'm Cleanne, but my name isn't Westbrook anymore." "Ah," Dorothy smiled. "Then what should we call you?" "Cleanne Little Volf," she replied, using the name the tribe had given her after she'd successfully tracked a wounded soldier for 3 days to prevent him from dying in the wilderness. "Perfect. Mrs. Little Volf, your story has reached the eastern newspapers. A white woman who escaped an illegal auction, found refuge with the Lakota, and chose to stay and marry a warrior. It's caused quite a sensation." "I don't understand." Reporter, a thin man with wire spectacles, stepped forward. "Ma'am, your case has become a symbol. Women's rights groups are using it to argue against laws that treat women as property. The Indian Rights Association is citing it as evidence that Native peoples are more civilized than we've claimed. And," Dorothy added, "certain politicians are demanding your return to proper society to prove American justice works." Ohanzi moved to stand beside his wife, his hand resting protectively on her shoulder. "She goes nowhere she doesn't choose to go." "Of course," Dorothy said quickly. "That's precisely our point. But Mrs. Little Volf, you should know there are warrants for your arrest in 3 territories. Judges claim you stole yourself from lawful owners." Cleanne felt ice in her veins. "Then why are you here?" "Because," the government official spoke for the first time, "President Grant has offered a full pardon in exchange for your testimony before Congress about the illegal auction and subsequent events. And if I refuse, then we pretend we never found you," Dorothy said firmly. "But Cleanne, may I call you Cleanne? Your voice could change laws. Protect other women from what you endured." Chief Red Cloud, who had been listening silently, stepped forward. "What guarantee do we have she would be allowed to return?" "You have my word," the official replied, "and the president's written promise." He produced an official document. "She testifies, receives her pardon, and is free to go wherever she chooses." That evening, the tribal council met to discuss the unprecedented situation. Some argued it was a trap, others that it was an opportunity. Winona, who had slowly warmed to Cleanne over the months, surprised everyone by speaking in her favor. "She could speak for us too," the older woman said. "Tell them we are not the savages they claim." "It's dangerous," Ohanzi said bluntly. "Washington is full of men who would see her locked away out of spite." "Everything we've done has been dangerous," Cleanne replied. "But Dorothy is right, other women are suffering. If I can help stop that ... then you've already decided." She looked at her husband, this remarkable man who had risked everything. For her freedom. Only if you think I should. Only if the tribe agrees. The vote was closer than she'd hoped, but it passed. 3 weeks later, Cleon stood before a joint session of Congress, wearing traditional Lakota dress that Winona had made specially for the occasion. Her testimony was clear, unflinching, and devastating. She detailed not just her own ordeal, but the broader patterns of legal abuse that left women vulnerable to predatory men. When she finished, the chamber was dead silent. "Mrs. Little Wolf," a senator finally said, "do you have any regrets about your unusual choice of husband?" She looked up at the gallery where a Hansi sat in his finest regalia, having insisted on accompanying her despite the risks. His presence had caused almost as much sensation as her own. "My only regret," she said clearly, "is that it took so long to find a man who saw me as an equal rather than property." The newspapers called it the testimony of the century. Within a year, 3 territories had banned auction sales of human beings, and the federal government had begun investigating other cases of legal trafficking. But for Cleon, the most important moment came as she and Ohanzi rode back into their hidden valley, where smoke rose from cook fires and children played between the lodges. "No regrets?" he asked, echoing the senator's question. She leaned back against his chest, feeling his strong arms around her as their horse picked its way down the familiar trail. "Only that we can't do it all over again," she said. Their laughter echoed off the mountain walls, carrying on the wind like a promise that love could indeed conquer the boundaries that men tried to build between hearts.